at you from deep within the grid. It's the fastest hour on Portland Community Media. I'm Alex Ansary, and this is Outside the Box edition 339 for February 8th, 2015. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Bill and James, for being here as well. A lot going on the planet, both locally and globally. But we're going to start tonight by discussing the Pineapple Express, as it's being called, the storm that's hitting the West Coast at this time. California, Oregon, and Washington all affected. We're seeing major flash flooding. Without further ado, let's play that video.
Well, storm after storm after storm coming into California. Some much needed rain, but unfortunately we're going to see flash flooding over the coming days. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist Bernie Rayno. Satellite picture, boy, that tells the story here. You have three storms. 1, 2, 3. And that's what's all heading into the same location, central and northern California and into the northwest over the next couple of days. The other thing I want to notice or point out to you is look how far south the moisture is as well. So we have a tropical feed of moisture coming in to California and in the northwest. And that's why there's no question by the time this setup ends, and it won't end until Sunday into Monday, we're going to be looking at double-digit rainfall, certainly, once we get into the higher elevations. We'll break it down, but again, all of this
rain. And as Bob Dylan said in a song, these times, they are a-changin'. We're seeing multiple volcanic eruptions, one in Russia and one in Japan. Let's play video number 3. There's also reports of dark rain, mysterious rain in Washington, in Spokane, in particular eastern Washington and eastern Oregon. Going to the video. This is Japan, and there seems to be evidence that is indicating that the mysterious rain that we're seeing may be ash from either this volcanic eruption in Japan or the eruption that also happens to be taking place in Russia. And so residents in the Spokane area and elsewhere are finding strange substances on their cars, on their homes, on their lawns. And while the media is reporting on it, not all the media outlets are connecting this with the volcanic eruption. Some media outlets are reporting it as a mystery. Video number 4, brief discussion about the drought, the problem in California, in particular in Northern California. It's pretty bad this time, and it's only going to drive more growth to the Portland area.
Is one of San Diego's main water sources. 10 News reporter Hannah Mullins is live on the Embarcadero. And Hannah, there's a real concern we could be heading into yet another year of drought.
There is, and these next 2 months could be critical, but you may have noticed I'm wearing short sleeves in the dead of winter. That's because it is hotter and drier than ever before.
Rain soaked the city in December, but we were too deep in drought to make much difference. That's when the statewide water supply was half of what it's historically been. But it got worse. This is video from last week, and that's about the extent of what splashed down. January should have been the wettest month, but the supply fell back to 1/4, according to the state's water report. County Resource Manager Dana Freehoff says we'd need 50% of average rain and snowfall to break the drought's hold.
And so thank you for playing that. Here's the issue. When you have an extended drought and you have areas where the ground is hardened, when the heavy rains come, there's nowhere for the water to go. So you have a flash flooding problem. But overall, this is good for California to be getting water. The question is the drought natural? And is this rainfall that we're seeing natural? Or is there something else taking place along the lines of weather modification and weather control? So as we see more growth, unnatural growth in the Portland area, as we see people literally pushed out of California, as we see people literally priced out of California, you're going to see the cost of living go up in this area, and you're going to see an increase in crime. Because remember, all different types of individuals are being pushed out of their own locale and directed towards Portland, not only those with money to actually buy a home, to create, in their eyes, a safer place to raise their children, even though the real Portlandia is not the safe world that a lot of people thought it was when they moved here. It also draws that criminal element, and also more homeless that have been pushed out of other areas in the U.S. And so long term, down the line, it's going to cause major problems locally. In video number 5, a neighbor right off of Northeast 33rd and Killingsworth not too far from the area where I spent a little bit of time. She reports in this Oregonian video what it was like for her to hear this crash inside the Walmart, where a truck blasted through and actually got stuck in the Walmart. Several men were trying to steal the ATM, and they got stuck inside the Walmart, and they had to flee by foot. Go ahead.
Checking things out, which, you know, I was a little unsure if that was a smart thing to do, but because I didn't know if somebody was still in there, and obviously somebody who's capable of doing that's probably not safe to be around. So yeah, I called 911. Somebody else already had, I believe, and they'd already had calls in, so that was pretty much it. Then they had the dogs come out and told everyone to go back inside, so I went back to sleep.
Is this troubling to you?
Yeah, I mean, I live right across the street, so, you know, it's not awesome to have a truck ram into a store and attempt to steal an ATM across the street from where I live.
Can you tell me what you saw and heard?
I did not see anything other than what everybody else saw, because by the time I got out here...
But what did you hear? Because you were sleeping, you said.
Yeah, I woke to the sound of...
What's also come out in the news this week is the fact that Portland is the #1 gentrified city in all the nation. And so there's repercussions that come with that when people are priced out of their homes, whether those criminal elements are moving here or whether people become criminals that are from this area that are not just gonna you know, accept their poverty, accept the circumstances that they're in. And the last thing that I am is an apologist for career criminals, but when you have such extreme gentrification on steroids, so to speak, there are certain repercussions that we see within society. So, video 6 is a brief summary by the Oregonian of some of the crime news that we've seen this week. Go ahead.
Hello, Oregon. I'm Kasha Hall here in the Oregonian newsroom in OregonLive.com. It's Friday, February 6th, and thanks for joining me for Crime Time News, a roundup of the top crime stories this week. This week, 4 men have been shot in 3 gang-related shootings. The shootings occurred in different parts of Portland, and police don't think the shootings are connected. The gang enforcement team, with about 25 members, is investigating each case. This week, Emily Smith brought you the story of how a judge ruled that no crime occurred when a man crouched down in a Target aisle and snapped photos up a 13-year-old's skirt. The judge said the behavior was lewd and appalling, but it didn't violate any statute on the books. The law bans secret photography in all places where people should expect privacy, like bathrooms or locker rooms. But the aisle in Target was a public place. A man has been found guilty of slicing open the abdomen of a Southeast Portland resident, causing the man's intestines to spill out. The incident occurred when the victim was confronting Andrei Kukravsky about stealing a bicycle last June. Kukravsky was found guilty of 10 charges. He faces a minimum of 7.5 years in prison, but could get as many as 40. A Portland man who said he didn't know exactly how his girlfriend's 1-year-old daughter ended up with a cracked skull was found guilty Thursday of assaulting her. Javier Sandoval was convicted of multiple crimes and faces a minimum of 7.5 years in prison. Sandoval testified that before the girl was taken to the emergency room, she slipped off a kitchen counter, was headbutted by an angry playmate, and tumbled down concrete stairs while she was under his watch. The jury didn't believe him. And finally tonight, this took some determination.
This one's interesting.
Tigard police say a woman climbed inside a drive-through window of a Burgerville to cook herself a burger Tuesday morning.
My kind of girl.
She was interrupted when an employee showed up for work around 4:30. She was wearing an apron and plastic gloves, but she was still arrested on suspicion of second-degree burglary. That's all I've got for you this week. Join me next week for another episode of Crime Time News. Until then, you can keep checking the Oregonian and OregonLive.com for the latest on these stories and more.
No doubt. You can also subscribe to the Oregonian YouTube channel. So a couple comments. Let's go back and take a closer look at the mugshot. And I want to tell of that individual that was involved in the disemboweling, the actual stabbing of the man who he was stealing a bike from. This guy went on a drug-fueled, demon-possessed rage. And I remember reading the story when it initially came out last year. And he has been found guilty, and I believe that his origins are from Ukraine. looking deeper at his last name, not that it has anything to do with the crime, but just to highlight that there is a crime epidemic with a lot of people that have been born here and also immigrants here in Portland and outer Southeast. And it's kind of been that way for years. There's a hardcore criminal element in outer Southeast. And I would also say that I feel there's a demon portal, that there's something strange around the area of 136th and Powell, 139th and Powell, 122nd and Powell. There's a lot of different stories that I've read over the years involving rape, sexual assault, gang beatdowns, stabbings, domestic violence. And even though we see these problems throughout our world, throughout our nation, throughout our city, I've noticed throughout my time here as a Portland native that there's a pretty high concentration of certain types of crimes in a certain part of Portland. I don't believe that meth manufacturing or meth use is the root of that problem. I believe that those are simply symptoms. I often wonder what happened in that part of Portland 100 years ago or 200 years ago. And if anyone knows, if anyone has a clue what happened in outer East Portland a long time ago when the city was founded or even before then, I would love to hear your thoughts. Alex_Ansary at hotmail.com is the email. But let's go to the facts of the story, and you decide whether or not you think this person was maybe influenced by maybe some dark spirits by looking at the nature of the crimes that he committed. So in a short period of time, either he did a hit of meth or he shot something up, and he went on a drug-fueled crime binge, which included carjacking another man, the theft of a pickup driver and beating its owner, and a scuffle with a police dog and officers who twice tasered him before taking him into custody. So he's facing a minimum of 7.5 years, and he could get as many as 40 years, and this is probably the guy that's going to get in some nasty stuff inside prison. It's unfortunate that so many young men in prison get longer sentences by having to defend themselves, which in some cases involves shanking someone that's coming after you that either is going to kill you or rape you. So it's unfortunate that so many men get sucked into the system and get stuck behind bars because of what they have to do to survive once they're there. So there's many travesties in looking at how some young men in our community and in our nation and on our planet end up in some of these prisons, and in some cases end up there for life. And so looking at the details of the story, his crime spree started after 10:30 at a home near Southeast 139th and Powell, where so many stories of violence seem to center around. 136th, 132nd, 122nd, 102nd. It's almost as if there's an artery of darkness that runs from Mount Hood down to Tabor and down to the bowels of Portland, literally the toilet of Old Town Chinatown. And then you see the elevation go up on the west side, which is not without its problems in families, crime, and other juvenile delinquent behavior. There's definitely a lot of that on the west side around Barber Boulevard and Capitol Highway. But I just want to make this clear that this part of Portland is a really freaky place. And over the course of my lifetime, I've seen a lot of stories come out of that area. So if you have any idea what happened in this part of town a long time ago for it to really go south so hardcore, feel free to share your information or what you think about the issue with me. Now going into another video. This is actually video from this man's court case. And this is made available by the Oregonian. This is video 7.
June 29th and June 30th. The big picture here is that on that evening and into the early morning hours, this man, Andrei Kukurensky, was on a drug-fueled rampage. He began the evening with a violent robbery, one that nearly cost a man his life. He followed that up very close in time with carjacking a complete stranger in the street. And if that wasn't enough, he continued further into that night and was breaking into another man's car. When discovered in that one, he beat that man severely. If that wasn't enough, he continued on.
And he
police finally
continued
caught up
on
with him.
to
He still
rape a
wouldn't
couch.
stop.
Yes, thank you for playing that. I'm just kidding. Not that there's anything funny about rape, but I'll tell you what, some of these meth heads start shooting up that stuff in their body. It's almost as if a spirit takes over and the real them checks out. And so that's something that I've always suspected about meth use for years. That when people start seeing shadow people start thinking people are after them, they're not entirely hallucinating. They're tapped into another dimension to where those entities are attracted to them. And this is also the case for women that are involved in sex work in Portland, involved in that world, that industry. Anytime you have violence, drugs, and lust, not love, but lust, all mixed together, very interesting, very dark energies can be detected, at least I feel it. Now, without further ado, meanwhile on downtown Portland, video number 8.
Why'd you take it on one side and bring it on over here to the world champion?
You're a geek.
The world champion,
you are
Ric Flair.
Woo! Yeah. You wicked scumbag. You're a wicked scumbag. That's what you are.
Oh yes, that's the progressive Portland. She's like, look at me, give me a little bit of attention. There's a guy with the camera. So there's the real Portlandia. And going to video number 9 now, you know, some people may be wondering, well, where have all the plastic bags? Where have they gone now that they've banned them at the supermarkets? That's right, plastic bags are banned here in a future Agenda 21 mecca of the new Portlandia that is currently being built. Going to video number 9.
Geopolitics.com.
I'll tell you where the plastic bags went. And we're going to the time code that I gave you a little bit further in the video.
In Burnside. Or, I mean...
Are we going to pay for the cab for you?
It appears that there's a little bit of a struggle. And what I've seen an increase in some of these videos showing the Portland police doing their job. And I use that word loosely in more of a general term. But I'm seeing more bags being put on people's heads, which reminds me of Abu Ghraib. It looks like a torture situation. Scroll forward just a little bit. So this man is a friend of the guy that's being arrested, and he claims that he was merely defending himself from assault. And so obviously there's a struggle taking place going forward a little bit further. You're going to see a bag put on this individual's head. And
yeah, I got some of it, yeah.
This is official Portland police policy. When a suspect or someone that's being detained allegedly spits at the officers. But one might wonder, did they actually spit at the officers, or are they just being accused of spitting at the officers so they can put a bag on their head? And how would you feel if a bag was put over your head and you were in a stressed out situation? Maybe you had too much to drink. Maybe you just need to cool off and scream and shout. And if you need to hit the concrete wall till your hand hurts and you start crying, then fine, so be it. But oftentimes in today's society, we see police making a bad situation even worse by getting aggressive with someone who's intoxicated. And so in certain situations, it is somewhat predictable that a human being that's being boxed into a corner, they might spit at an officer. But is it right that they should be turned into a convicted felon or something to that effect, or have a bag put on their head? You know, I think it really comes down to why were they arrested to begin with, and were they in the wrong? Because in many cases, people are arrested or detained where they actually did nothing wrong, but they end up accruing additional charges like assault on a police officer, which is a felony, and spitting is considered assault. So what we're seeing here is a rise in plastic bags on heads in Portland, Oregon, which remind us of something, which remind us of torture. And I'll say to some of you that are, older audience members that are okay with this, what the hell's wrong with you? They weren't doing this to you when you were 20 or 30, hanging out in Portland in the 70s and 80s and 90s. I think that some of you have actually had your hearts calloused by merely living in Portland. And I would not want to wish this on the younger generation, the things that are coming. A lot of you that are older did not have to live in this kind of a police state the way it's turning into, what it's turning into, the type of police state that our country's becoming. So I would definitely, going back to the video, I would definitely consider those words I just shared. The world is changing. It's not the same world you grew up in. And I say that knowing that most of the people watching this show are much older than I. Okay, so getting the next video ready. As you heard in that crime report from the Oregonian, video number 10 elaborates on the fact that, you know, despite we're in a world where so many things that seem to be legal yesterday are illegal today, it's amazing to see that it's actually not against the law for a creepo to attempt to take a picture of a girl in a compromised position simply because it was done in a public place. Go ahead.
Caught taking pictures up a teenage girl's dress, but a judge says that's not illegal. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Gianola.
I'm Ann State. This ruling is shocking. We just talked to the girl's father, our Joel Iwanaga, going beyond the headlines tonight. He's live in Beaverton.
Ann and Jeff, good afternoon to you guys. You know, this is upsetting to a lot of people here. The verdict, as you can imagine, has the family of the victim, she's a 13-year-old girl, outraged tonight that a man could walk right here into the Beaverton Target store, use his smartphone, and snap a picture up her skirt, and then this week have all charges dropped. Well, 61-year-old Patrick Buomo is now a free man after a Washington County judge said Buomo did not break any Oregon laws.
All right,
now, here's why.
that.
He was taking pics.
We're going to cover a lot tonight, but, you know, in short, a lot of people have migrated out to Beaverton thinking that they're going to get away or that they've gotten away from the social ills of Portland. Remember that the people of Beaverton are drinking fluoridated water. Remember that there's a strong spirit of greed in Beaverton, where there is this obsession with materialism and being in suburbia and having a picket fence and having that new condo, you know, and being separated from the social ills down in Babylon, which they think is another city away. But in reality, Beaverton and the people of Beaverton, the families of Beaverton, they got a lot of effing problems. And don't you forget that. So now, going to the next video. This is video number 12. Is the economy getting so bad? Is our relationships between men and women becoming so complicated that we're seeing less marriages? Could that potentially have some sort of influence over the fact that more and more bakeries that specialize in baking wedding cakes are going under in the Portland area? Going now to video 12.
A soon-to-be bride is scrambling to get a new cake in time for her wedding, all because the business she trusted with the order suddenly closed. Stephanie Quintero says she put a deposit down on the nearly $640 cake almost a year and a half ago at Right Berry's Cake and Cupcakes in Oregon City. We checked and we found the business is now closed. There are signs up over the front door. Now, ironically, Quintero says she could have gotten married last year and had the cake, but she waited 2 years to make it perfect.
When I found out that my star cake was now ripped away from me, it felt like I got kicked in the gut. And I just started crying. And it's silly, it's just a cake, but it was our special thing.
Coin 6 has tried to call the owner of Right Berry's Cake and Cupcakes, but we have not gotten a response. Quintero is now looking for a replacement cake, but she's worried because the design is so different that
well, maybe she can go in a new direction and she can get something instead of a wedding cake. You know, thank you for playing that. Maybe you can look at something more natural like honey, agave, cacao, coconut oil. There's a friend of mine that shared with me a great dessert recently that's all natural. I'm trying to get away from sugar, but going back to the story, I have compassion for married couples out there that are trying to make their way in this world and not be divided. And there are so many attempts to demonize men in today's society and demonize women, to demonize the human species. It's happening at all fronts, and people are suffering. So, you know, my heart goes out to married couples out there that are trying to make it, and not only married couples, but people that are in relationships. And I think that if people really love each other, they should work to make it work if they've got problems, because there's a lot of different ways in which we are affected by the mind control in today's society. And I think that we've seen a real genuine decline in love and romance. And I think that that's exactly what we need more of in the society. Human love. Between friends as well. Platonic love. Love between human beings, romantic and non-romantic. And to me, in my understanding, that's the kind of thing that's going to save us from the ultimate nightmare that seems to be being crafted for the people of the world by these dark forces that are running these world governments. So remember, do not underestimate the power of human love. Huey Lewis, when he sang that song, The Power of Love, He may have been doing a lot of cocaine back in the 80s. He may have been smoking some real strong wacky tobacco, but there's power in those words, and there is power in love, and that is why human love is under attack. So always forget that. Always hold that in your consciousness. Love is important. Men are important. Women are important. Resist the mind control that is telling us opposite. Now going to the next video, which is 11. Will Portland rejoin or will Portland stay in the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force? It's being asked right now on the local level
What a controversy.
by the media,
I can tell you that most folks here
whether
on
or not
City
we're going to
Council
stay in the
have their
JTTF.
internal opinions about whether or not to recommit to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. But tonight, though, all about public opinion.
I don't like the FBI because you can't trust
Here's Joe
them.
Walsh.
Those against the JTTF mince no words before City Council. One of them, Brandon Mayfield, the Portland attorney who was wrongly accused by the FBI in a terrorist train bombing a decade ago.
I'll never forget it, of course, and it was, it was contrary to constitutional dictates.
The city has to decide if it will assign and embed 2 Portland police officers to the controversial task force. Oregon U.S. Attorney Amanda Marshall tells me Portland is the only major U.S. city not involved in it.
If the JTTF does not have Portland police are basically putting their heads in the sand and saying, we don't want to know what you're doing in our city.
Marshall points to the bomb scare at Portland's tree lighting ceremony in 2010. 19-year-old Mohammed Mahamoud was arrested for the plot. At the time, Portland police did work with the FBI, but it was just on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. We think it'll make our city safer. We think it'll make the task force
So how many times have you heard me reference the fact that in late September or in late 2009, around the time of December, where they lit the Christmas tree, the FBI staged an event. FBI informants went out and they got that guy from, I think, Aloha or somewhere near Beaverton, that Somalian immigrant, and they put him up to the whole thing of going with a backpack to the Christmas tree lighting. And they hung out with this guy, and I'm speaking about the FBI. They taught him how to blow up a backpack in Lane County. You've heard me go over the details of the case before. And so what does this really tell us? There are some ignorant mofos in the Portland area, in local law enforcement, in the city, in the media. You see, that's not even being mentioned in the context of the JTTF, that the FBI manufactured an event, just like we've seen the FBI manufacture the 1993 attempted bombing of the World Trade Center. And it came out that it was a federal operation. So people on the local level that don't know about this, don't know what took place in late 2009, they should. And I don't think that there's an excuse for ignorance. But it's important that people understand that this is a part of a larger agenda, and it's playing out now as I speak. Going now to larger issues taking place on the planet. Video number 13. We have this supposed report on ISIS
planning to go to neighboring countries and start kidnapping Americans and other foreigners.
The ultimate fear card.
You've got some new information. Tell us what you're learning.
Yes, well, for regional security source telling me that intelligence indicates that an ISIS outfit in Raqqa in Syria has been developing plans since at least the middle of last year to kidnap Western and international hostages from neighboring countries, including Jordan and Lebanon, and bring them back over the border into Syria. That this cell in Raqqa were developing these plans. So obviously significant concern that ISIS may be looking to capture more hostages, more Americans, more internationals, more Europeans, so that they can
and you're
hold
getting
them
the point.
and use
Thank
them
you.
for these
So where is this going? Where are they trying to take this hysteria in America? And here's another question you might want to ask yourself. We might want to ask ourselves. How long are they going to be able to play this card of ultimate fear, ultimate terror? And you know it results in racism. You know it results in people going, that person looks a little Persian. That person looks a little Arabic. And so when people are being hit 24/7 with racist mind control, where people are associating race with religion and religion with violence. You know, all Muslims want to enforce Sharia law, you know, that BS, which even some viewers of this show may believe, or this YouTube channel, which is highly unfortunate. Let me cut to the chase. If you believe that nonsense, you will believe anything. If you are willing to believe this type of crap, then you have set yourself up to believe other outrageous lies. And if you believe other outrageous lies down the line in your future, your life could be in jeopardy. If you're being told to go to a certain place or go to a FEMA camp or leave this area or turn in your neighbor, turn in your mother, turn in yourself, kill yourself. You know, there are all these different ways they are seeking to penetrate your consciousness. And if you don't have an internal alarm clock, if you don't have an internal, siren that goes off when there's a lie, when you're believing a lie, you can be led into a trap. And that definitely needs to be said for those of you that are buying this lie. You already know that ISIS is being funded by Western intelligence, or at least you should, because all this evidence has come out, in case you didn't know that. That's how in plain sight it is. And we've also seen, for those of you that know about secret societies, things of that nature, whether you go down that rabbit hole or not, there's been a lot of ISIS symbolism that we've seen over time. So isn't it interesting they're calling this ISIS, and in some cases they're calling it ISIL, and all these other weird things are taking place. All you really need to know is that we are living in the age where they want you to believe the absurd. And if you're willing to believe the absurd, if you're willing to lower your own frequency and develop racist tendencies, tribalistic tendencies, to where you only trust people that look just like you, then you're going to see the effect of your actions and your thoughts, because we are constantly creating this reality with our thoughts. So be very careful before you think you're awake to what's really going on, as you may or may not be urinating in your pants as you see these headlines from ISIS coming out of the news, seeking to hypnotize you. And I would also place some stress on having compassion for others. Think about all those innocent people that are in this country that have either migrated here, or they are the children of those that migrated here 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And they have Arabic features and Persian features, and they're not completely pale or white. They're going to have to live in this police state as more and more people, and this military police state, really. It's not just about the local police, it's about something larger. They are the ones that are really being hurt by this, people that are being feared and marginalized. And since American Sniper came out, there have been more violent attacks on Muslims worldwide. And there's one more very important aspect of this. And now I'm speaking to those that are darker skinned and those that are Muslim. They are trying to create a sense of fear so great on this planet that people that feel that they are targeted, to create a fear so great to where they never speak out against anything. They never share their truth. They're afraid to go outside, some of them, or if they're not now, maybe they will be later. So there is an intended impact psychologically upon the local population, upon the global population. It's a giant psychic attack. It's an attack on our psyche. It's an attack on our consciousness. And when you're attacking consciousness, you can affect and influence behavior, which also includes violent retaliation. And so people must be aware that they are trying to turn every conceivable perceived group against another group. Men versus the women, women versus the men, Muslims versus non-Muslims, Christians versus non-Christians, homeless in Portland versus those in Portland that have something, those in Portland that have something versus the homeless, class warfare, all these different levels. By being aware of the game, by being aware of the deception, by being honest with yourself as to what's taking place, you can take preventative measures to make sure that you are not adversely impacted by this propaganda. Video number 14 is from CCTV, and this is the English Chinese news network. And so this is not just about the American media. Here is China using a white woman, a blonde woman, to push the same propaganda and lies about ISIS/ISIL. Go ahead.
The U.S. Department of Justice says the ring dates back to May 2013 and was led by a St. Louis, Missouri couple who came to the U.S. as Bosnian refugees. They have already appeared before a judge. All 6 of those charged are in the United States legally. Nihad Rosic, seen here in a previous arrest photo from the Utica, New York Police Department, and one other in the group, they are also charged with conspiring to kill and maim those in a foreign country. According to court papers, Rosic even tried to fly to Syria to join the fight last July. Now, the group not only allegedly
Okay, so
sent
thanks for playing that. I'm going to try to speed things up to get through the rest. Now, Edward Snowden. There is some sort of a statement that's been made about how China got their F-35 and it's stealing the blueprints from the United States. Go ahead and roll it.
China stole key designs of advanced fighter jets from the U.S. Top secret documents released by former U.S. intelligence contractor Edward Snowden show Chinese cyber spies stole military data from the U.S. The documents suggest that Chinese cyber spies stole key design information about the Lockheed Martin F-35 Lightning II from the U.S.
An ongoing issue, but they want your focus on ISIS, ISIL. They want your focus, women, on hating men. They want your focus, men, on hating women. They want civil war. They want civil unrest. They don't want Americans waking up to the fact that they've been sold out by their own government. They want us to hate each other. They want us to hate others. Love is the answer. Awareness is the answer. Education is the answer. And not falling into these mind control traps. So China for years has been getting our best technology, and it's all being built up for this stage-managed World War III scenario that'll come at a later point in time when our nation is much, much weaker. Now, this is my contact information, by the way. For anyone out there that may want to support this show, for anyone out there that may want to contribute some news tips, for anyone out there that may want to contribute some information, whether it be local corruption or also events taking place in Portland that you may want me to mention on air, so people are aware of those events, so people are aware of those protests, so people are aware of those meetups, so people are aware of those gatherings. Let me know and I'll do a PSA right here on this show. Also, I do a lot of content. I put up a lot of content elaborating on some of the topics at my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Alex Ansary. Feel free to subscribe and you'll have access for free to the content that I put out during the week. So going back to the news and getting video number 16 ready, I talk about solar flares every now and then on this show, and they are launching another satellite into space that will assist scientists at looking at the sun and making their observations. Go ahead.
Tomorrow, the launch of Discover, the first operational space weather mission to be launched by NOAA into deep space. It's a very exciting time for all of us. Discover, when it launches, will take about 110 days to get to its observing point, which is kind of a unique place for us. As I said, it's the first deep space observer we have. It will be sitting at what's called the Lagrange point, which is a gravitationally stable point between the Earth and the Sun, about 1 million miles away from the Earth, directly in line with the Sun. From that position, it is staring at the Sun and taking in situ data of the measurements of the wind, the solar wind, and the coming from the Sun in real time, and transmitting that data directly to the Earth. Solar storms can have a potential to provide significant impact to the Earth and to the society. Major economic critical sectors could be affected by it, such as aviation, telecommunications, power grids, and global positioning systems could be affected by the significant solar storms.
But what they do not talk about is how we are affected on a conscious level, how the sun influences our behavior. But there are mainstream articles now that are emerging that are linking solar flares to strokes, in particular geomagnetic storms, connecting it to an increase in suicides. There's a 2008 New Scientist article. And what I discovered back in 2008, and I've been studying it ever since, is that the cycles of world wars seem to correlate with solar maximums. And one pattern that I've also discovered a couple years ago is that false flag events or staged events, things like 9/11, tend to happen around these solar peaks. And it's my belief that the dark occultic forces that are behind government, they understand human biology. They understand human physiology. And so certain events are staged at certain times, like we're seeing a lot of events staged right now, to trigger panic, to trigger fear, and to trigger a certain aggressive response in the population. So that's why you're seeing all this stuff right now, trying to sick the global population on the Islamic world, trying to get the Islamic world to retaliate. All the while, the black ops are funding both sides. ISIS is well known to be funded by Saudi Arabia and the United States, as well as Mossad via Israel, Mossad being Israel's intelligence agency, their CIA. And so all this is out in the open, and there's no doubt in my mind why we're seeing so much unrest within society at this particular point in time. So be aware, we're in solar maximum for another year. We've been in an extended solar maximum, I would say, since the 2010-2011 time period. And it is my suspicion that we're going to see the stage-managed event known as World War III between China, Russia, and the United States, likely in about 10 years, during the peak of the next solar cycle. So only time will tell if my estimation is correct. Now, I'm going to talk briefly about police. In video number 8, we'll go ahead and video number 18, we will go ahead and roll that. And this video relates to
this happened. A plainclothes police officer handcuffed and arrested her right
public
inside
defender
the courthouse.
in San Francisco arrested.
NBC Bay Area's Christy Smith is in San Francisco with more. Christy, strange to see this video. What happened?
Well, certainly the public defender's office is saying that they're outraged and disappointed. One of their own was put in handcuffs and detained, but San Francisco police say under the circumstances, there's a clear reason. This is video with subtitles provided by the San Francisco Public Defender's Office. They're expressing outrage at what they say is the treatment of Deputy Public Defender Jamie Tillotson at the Hall of Justice.
I was told that I was interfering, I would be taken into custody. I was, needless to say, shocked by the situation.
So what I've seen,
they say her client was on the court calendar for misdemeanor
these very
theft,
intense
but
times where we're
outside
seeing
the
more
court, he
and more
and
civil
another
unrest.
man approached about
We
a
see
different
more
case,
police getting
so
in fights
Tillotson
with
came
other
out.
police, and we see the system, in a way, being sicked on the system, or those that are working within the system. So more common folk, as you could put it, one could put it, we're seeing more people like this woman and others being affected adversely by this ever-encroaching and emerging police state.
Argue she was detained.
And this video is just more evidence of this. All that she said is you can't take a photo of this guy, leave him alone, and just like that, she was put in handcuffs. So all of this is a hallmark of an aggressive society where men are, in some cases, aggressive towards women. Thank you for playing that. And so women, when they're critical of some of the unconscious behavior from men, really should steer away from generalizing all men and give credit to those men that are against these atrocities or against what one could call patriarchy or any archy, any archon-like system. And instead, I would like to see people that are addressing how this system, this government, isn't such a great protector or surrogate boyfriend or husband, where you can just, use your cell phone and dial 911 if you have any problems. In the real world, the way things really work, governments have been the greatest oppressors of women worldwide. And when you look at the things that our government is involved in today and the lives that they're turning to you-know-what in other countries, that they're bombing, occupying, and so on and so forth, this is really bad karma. This is really bad karma to be involved with disrupting the lives of women, bombings, murdering their children, kidnapping their husbands, all these things and more, the American and Western governments are involved in this very second. So as women feel less than blissful in today's society, it's important that they look at the larger picture and the real purpose of government, and protecting women's rights and making the lives of women easier. That's not the government's agenda. It may seem that way. It may seem that the government is pro-women's rights and safety, but what you're seeing now with women, in some cases being hired before men, it's all the illusion of freedom as more and more people are showing how unhappy they are being slaves at their desk job, at their office job, at their restaurant, at their bar. Do you see a world of happy females today that are working $1 at a time to make rent for something that they'll never own? I see nothing, especially in Portland, I see nothing but pure misery and rage, primal Gaia rage towards other people, coming from, in particular, women that are stuck at these dead-end jobs. And so it's time that people really start taking a closer look at what type of reality the government and these multinational corporations are creating for us. And it's anything but a better world for women. And that's the God-honest truth. Now going to the next video.
The case against
This video relates to a Good Samaritan that protected a woman from being killed, as the report is saying, at the hands of a police officer. Go ahead.
Jonathan Osborne has spent the last 3 days here at the Clark County Jail awaiting those official charges. Meanwhile, his wife and a stranger who attempted to try and rescue her from that alleged beating are now recovering from their injuries. We spoke to that Good Samaritan who tells us about the shocking encounter with this LMPD police officer.
I just did what I thought was right. I just couldn't stand to see somebody get hurt. I know normally somebody's quick to grab their phones out and just record it, but I just can't bear to see somebody being treated like that. I just couldn't do it.
It was the night of the Super Bowl when Louis Mossy was driving through Sellersburg when he watched the car in front of him crash into the parking lot of a John Deere store. The two occupants quickly got out, at which point Mossy heard the male passenger yelling at the female driver.
The next thing I knew, he took 2 or 3 steps towards her and punched her in the jaw.
The force knocked her to the ground. While calling for help, Mossy attempted to approach the couple.
She was trying to get up on her hands and knees, and he took 2 steps forward towards her and just kicked her right in the head, and I was shocked. I couldn't believe it.
The man behind the alleged beating, 34-year-old Jonathan Osborne, a 10-year veteran in the Louisville Metro Police Department.
I noticed that he had her in a chokehold, and he was standing behind her, and her feet were barely touching the ground. And I didn't know if he was trying to kill her or what.
Mossy says it was then that he tackled Osborne to the ground, breaking his own wrist.
And obviously he was injured for doing that. He could have been killed. And we live in a day and age where people are terrified of stepping in if they see a police officer hurting someone. There's a video I played a couple months ago where a drunk police officer was trying to arrest a woman because she didn't go home and have sex with him. It was all being done in the public. It was being filmed. And so it's not just people that take a shot of meth in outer southeast Portland right off 139th and Powell that go ape shit like a monkey. But we also see police officers that enjoy their position of power, acting in some cases like they're possessed by an entity. And we see them punching women in the face, kicking them in the head, karate style. That's a famous video that's out there. Taking a 14-year-old black girl and, throwing her on the hood of a car. Yeah, for those people that are protesting, some of these recent situations that have taken place, where were they when the 14-year-old was literally body slammed by a large buff white cop? Where were they then? And so there are many stories where women have been victimized and men have been victimized by the police, and the population does nothing. Unless, of course, CNN and the media wants to race bait and tell them to care. And this is a problem. This is an issue within our society. Now, video number 20 talks about how and I believe this is out of Texas.
Will help police do more than
they're going to be giving more expensive tickets to those caught texting while driving.
A Virginia company called Comsonics is reportedly developing a new gizmo that uses radar to detect whether drivers are texting behind the wheel. The radar gun would scan frequencies emitted from inside vehicles. The idea poses a lot of unanswered questions, like how can a device tell the difference between driver texts and passenger texts? Another handheld radar device is already being used to help police see through walls. Well, sort of. It's called Ranger. Basically, it's a highly sensitive motion detector, about 9 inches long and weighing only about a pound. Ranger shoots radar rays through a wall and into a room on the other side.
Okay, so you're getting the point.
Rays bounce back.
You are getting the point. We hear all these cries for more funding for law enforcement, and look at all these ridiculous laws that they have created so local counties, cities, ordinances can get more revenue. And if you think that the Portland police will always be somewhat friendly like they are now during this time where Portland's super popular, #1 place to move to, #1 place for child sex trafficking, #1 most gentrified city. There's lots of different reasons why people are coming here. And yes, when documentaries are made about the child sex trafficking problem, when documentaries are made about how much drugs are here, it actually draws some of those elements here to take part in that activity. And this is also how certain reports on certain things can end up in a not so positive light. So this is very serious what we're seeing, and on that reference to Austin, they have created an ordinance in Austin, Texas, where it's hundreds of dollars per ticket if you're caught texting. How much food can $300 buy, even though we see an increase in the cost of food? For a lot of us, that's several months. For those of us that are on a lower than average budget, that's a lot of food. That's a lot of groceries, especially if you know how to budget buy. So when I see people robbed by the system, it saddens me. In that 1 year that I was living in Dallas, Texas, I was pulled over for texting. I was just checking a voicemail, and I never used the cell phone. I don't use one anymore. And during that time period, I was barely touching my cell phone because I was seen by a police officer checking a voicemail or checking a text on a dead-end road in a town with a population of 500. Didn't matter. I was given a $350 ticket, and when I went before the judge and had that extorted, I gave that judge, the court police officer, and the court typist a piece of my mind that when you steal from others, you encourage theft in the population. So, you know, here we live in a world where it's considered illegal for you to go into a store and steal something if you're hungry and starving to death, but it's considered okay for the government to rob us. And so there are so many different psychological problems that arise in a population that is being so oppressed. Going to the next video. This is out of New Jersey. And we are going to video 21.
We have video of a nasty brawl between rival high school basketball teams from Santa Monica and Beverly Hills. CBS 2's Greg Mills tells us what steps are being taken to prevent it from happening again. It's a story you'll see only on 2.
Angry words and
you
punches
see more
thrown
fighting within the population when we're in a decadent society. We're running low on time. Instead of showing you this full video of 2 different high school football fans or basketball fans or whatever the hell they are going at it, we'll now jump to video 22. And in this case, we have a young man.
Okay.
I don't know what I'm looking at. Can we pan down the audio? I'm not sure what that video was. 22. And if that was 22, scroll through the video. 22. Just hit it and then scroll through it. We're seeing more attacks on teachers. We're seeing more manufactured race conflict, racial conflicts. And we're seeing the problem of the bystander effect in today's society. So thank you for playing that. That teacher could have sustained serious injuries. It is clear that that teacher wasn't fighting back because we also live in a culture of fear where they say call the police and only call the police and never actually defend yourself, when in reality, men in this society need to remember that they have fists for a reason. And when people are being victimized, when people are being hurt, when women are being hurt, when teachers are being hurt, when the elderly are being hurt, it is the responsibility of the men in that community, at that scene, or women, to actually defend the weak. And I believe this is part of what keeps us human. It's defending the weak. It's standing by the side of humanity. It's standing against the machine. It's standing against the evil. And as long as I'm alive in this body, as long as I continue to be here in Portland, Oregon, producing this show, I will continue to promote ideals that relate to humanity, and I will continue to speak against this draconian, technological, beast-like robotic system that we are being involuntarily pushed to. All right, we're going to get into more information next week. I want to thank you all for watching. We have now reached the conclusion of this broadcast. Until next week, I'm Alex Ansary, reminding you that the path to the ultimate truth and place of power still lies in one place, within. Good night, take care, and stay safe.